I'm still nervous after seeing the film.
Are you?
I've still got the shakes in a good way. So congratulations.
Oh, great.
Why now? Why was there? And how much did COVID, Brexit, things like that play into bringing it back?
They're inevitably part of it because they're so close. You can see them drift in and out of focus as ideas when you watch the film. You think, oh, that's like, but it was the fact, it was more the appetite of audiences for the original film. But they'd have these screenings in London and they'd ask me to go along to a Q&A, and you'd go along and think, oh, it'll be a curiosity piece or, be a slightly cult idea or something. But it was ferocious, the appetite of the audience. And I used to ring Alex Garland, the screenwriter, and I'd say, I think we should probably go back to this, because see if we can generate another story. And then he came up with this idea. It's a very big idea because it's really 3 films, even though we've made one and we've shot another one, and with the third one still to make. And it culminates in Cillian, the character from the original film, but it starts very much away from him in a different part of the world, off the northeast coast, and with a completely different cast. A wonderful cast, but completely different. So everything's up in the air, and that gives you a freedom, which is lovely to make a kind of an independent, unique film, which has connections with the original, but should stand on its own as well.
When you mentioned Cillian there, one of the things that strikes me is we knew how good he was from Disco Pigs, but the world didn't know how big he was then. And looking at this, young Alfie is an incredible young actor, and I'm just wondering where you found him, and can you see him taking off and becoming a superstar, because he's amazing.
It'd be interesting if he couldn't have a finer role model than Cillian. Actually, I don't know whether he's a big fan of Cillian or not, because we didn't really talk to him about that, but he could, because one of the wonderful things about Cillian, and I saw him on stage doing Grief Is That Thing with Feathers. He's continued to do occasional stage work, which brings out a different side of an actor rather than film work, though the two are inextricably, obviously linked, umbilically linked. He'd be a very fine role model for him. We'll see. He's just starting off, he's a long way to go.
He's amazing. There's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of brutality, which we expect from this based on, their first film. But the tender moments between Isla and Spike really balance that, but the relationship is so beautiful. Did that, obviously it was in the script, but the fact that it's so tender, did that develop organically between the two of them?
Yes, and it also came out, we shot in sequence order. So the whole experience with his father, which is much more alpha male, gung-ho, kind of, following my footsteps, had taken place. He'd been through that experience. So I realised in retrospect, and this is me only realising it afterwards, how much that helped, because it gave him something very, very different to respond to as an actor and as a kid, just to begin to respond to her. She's an extraordinary actress, and she introduced him to a sort of different kind of acting, really, which is stiller and more precious in a way, quieter, and values and transmitted values that are not that easy to put your finger on, but actually are substantial and lead him to be a proper adult emerging at the end of the film, rather than one just born of his father. Yeah.
I know everybody, I'm sure, is asking you about the design and the evolution of the infected.
Yeah.
But the ones that crawl, I'd love to know how you came up with that, because I can see how the speedy ones got bigger and stronger, but these sort of almost slug-like beings.
It's a kind of classic. You would now analyse what would the time have done. Now, 28 years might not be enough in biological evolution. You're probably looking at hundreds and hundreds of years. But for the sake of a film, it's wonderful to compress it. Some would have gone to ground and used less energy, especially those who, for instance, couldn't hunt. And they stay on the ground and they eat whatever's available on the ground, worms, snails, bugs, berries, whatever. And they begin to look like the ground. We imagine them burning in the sun and so you start to scale up their back. But their flesh, which never sees the sun, remains a kind of, Anyways, they're quite unpleasant to look at. So they're quite an exciting variant. They're still very dangerous. They're quite passive, but they're still very dangerous if disturbed or provoked. And then the other two variants are obviously the infected regular, if you like, that you've met in the first film, and they've learned to hunt. And that's the big evolutionary development for them, because otherwise they would have just starved to death. They need energy, so they hunt. And to hunt without weapons, you have to be organised. You have to have a pack like dogs. And when you do that, a dominant emerges, a dominant variant emerges, and that's the alphas, who are the really big ones, the really scary ones. So it's kind of like common sense. You think, how would it evolve? Like there's a good case for it evolving like that. And there is another variance in a way in the scene in the train, when the two women meet. And that's kind of, again, you could say, is that a variant? I don't know, but it's an evolutionary process that is a surprise, yeah.
It is definitely a big surprise. I loved it. I was very scared, and I cannot wait to see what comes next. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's
Thanks.
lovely. Thanks very much.
Good. Thank you.